Hello, Sunny Lane. It's my joy to be with you. My name is Alan Taylor. I'm the executive pastor of ministries at First Baptist Church Concord, which is in Knoxville, Tennessee. And I have sure grown to love your pastor and his wife and their family. They've become dear, dear friends with Linda, my wife, and I. And we have certainly enjoyed some awful good, sweet times of fellowship with them. I'm excited about these four lessons that we're going to be doing together under the title of A Christian Worldview University. You know, it's important that we understand a worldview. We're going to look at the introduction of that. I hope that you have a handout that's been made available by your church. If not, that's okay. But if you do, I'm just going to literally walk you through each one of these points as we look at the introduction of a Christian worldview. Hey, if you've got a Bible handy with you, I want you to look, if you will, over in Mark chapter 12. We want to kick this off by looking at a particular passage of Scripture that we want to use to sort of launch us out into this study. Mark chapter 12, starting at verse 28. You'll be very familiar with the passage. It reads, "And one of the scribes came, and having heard them reasoning together, and perceiving that he had answered them well, asked him," that is, asked Jesus, "What is the first commandment of all?" And Jesus answered them, "The first commandment, the first of all the commandments is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord." And now he's going to give them the first and greatest commandment that we've got to have. "Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy mind, and with all thy strength. This is the first commandment." You know, have you ever heard anyone say, "Man, I just love the Lord with all of my heart"? You know, I've heard people say that. I'm sure you have as well. Or I've heard people say something like, "I just love the Lord with all my soul." Or maybe they would say it like, "I just love the Lord with all my being." Well, I've heard that statement before. But have you ever heard someone say, "I love the Lord with all my mind"? I've never heard that. And yet in this passage, God commands us to love us with our mind just as much as we do our hearts. And yet it seems to be that we have neglected that part. Of course, he goes on to say we're to love him with all of our strength as well. That is, we're to love him with everything, our whole being, our whole existence. We're to love God. Well, when we look at a Christian worldview, we're really looking at more of the mind. Because you see, the Lord wants you to love him with all of your mind. That is, he wants you to give him your mind. Dear friend, it's inexcusable for a Christian to be intellectually lazy. Just like it is if he's spiritually lazy or physically lazy. But I'm just telling you, it's an affront to us. It's a reproach to us as believers to not love God with our minds. It's a shame that when a Mormon or a JW knocks on our door, we don't even know how to engage them because we've not given our mind to God, and so we just don't even answer the door and wait till they leave. So we ought to give our minds to God. Don't be intellectually lazy. You see, your thinking matters. Ideas matter. In fact, it was that very thing, the ideas that Satan challenged Eve with in the garden and deceived her. And so we need to understand, you see, our beliefs definitely shape our behaviors. But dear friend, our thinking is what shapes our beliefs. And so the way we believe directly affects how we live. And therefore we need to think right. So let me just walk you through your handouts there. I hope you've got them. And so let's start off by answering, what is a worldview? I'm going to give you 5 different people's thoughts on that. So here's the first one. A worldview is a set of presuppositions, that is, assumptions which may be true, partially true, or entirely false, but they're still your presuppositions, which we hold, either consciously or subconsciously, consistently or inconsistently, about the basic makeup of our world. Here's a second definition. A worldview is that basic set of assumptions that gives meaning to one's thoughts. A worldview is the set of assumptions that someone has about the way things are, what things are and why things are. Our third definition that we're using by David Noble here is a worldview is any ideology, philosophy, theology, movement, or religion that provides an overarching approach to understanding God, the world, and the relationship of people to God and the world. Fourthly, a worldview is a comprehensive view of life through which we think, understand, and judge, and which determines our approach to life and meaning, by Dr. Danny Akin, who is now the president of Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary. And then the last one that we'll give is one's worldview is perhaps best reflected by one's answer to the ultimate questions of life. Who am I? Why am I here? Where am I going? What's it all about? Is there a God? And how can I live and die happily? What are good and evil? So, hopefully that frames it up for you a little bit, gives you some idea about a worldview. So here's 5 functions of a worldview. This is important. A worldview seeks to provide a coherent and organized thought system. That's one of the functions of a worldview. A second function is a worldview attempts to define the good life, therefore bringing hope and meaning to life. A third function of a worldview is a worldview brings sense to life by offering explanations for seemingly irrational events that occur in life. A fourth definition is a worldview determines our values. That's so true. We'll see that as we go through this. And fifthly, a worldview guides actions by assigning values and priorities to those actions. So, let's look then at 6 facts about our worldview. Number 1, everyone has a worldview. Everyone, a particular way of looking at life. Now, they may not even realize they have a worldview. They may consciously be aware of that worldview. They may be unconsciously aware of that worldview, but they operate within the context of their worldview. It's their way of thinking. You see, folks, your worldview, I like to use, is like glasses. When I do not wear my glasses, I see things a certain way. But when I put on my glasses, it changes how I see things. That your glasses are your worldview. Like sunglasses, you put on sunglasses and it shades everything that you see. And so your worldview, here it is the lens through which you see the world. Now, you see, as a believer, that we're titling this a Christian worldview. We ought to see the world through the eyes of a Christian. We ought to see the world through the eyes of the Bible. We ought to have a biblical worldview. That's the reason that we have 2 lenses, you see. One lens is the Old Testament, and one lens is the New Testament. And so we see the world through the lens of our Bible. That's what believers are supposed to do. You see, we shouldn't see the world through Democrat or Republican. We shouldn't see the world through union or non-union. We ought to see the world first and foremost through the eyes of the Bible, because we're believers. Number 2, our worldview gives conviction to life. Now, I point out Philippians 1:21 there, where the Apostle Paul said, "For me to live is Christ." Man, he just said a word about his worldview. He's going to live through the Jesus life. He's going to think the way Jesus would have him to think. And so his worldview is influenced by Jesus. You remember the Columbine shooting there in Columbine, Colorado, back in 1999. Some of you will, if you're my age. Well, you'll remember that one of the young ladies that died was Rachel Scott. Here's what she said that was written exactly 1 year before that shooting and her death. She said, "It's like I have a heavy heart. I lost friends at school. Now that I began to walk my talk, they make fun of me. If I have to sacrifice everything, I will. If my friends have to become my enemies to be with my best friend Jesus, that's fine." I mean, bottom line is she's had a shift in worldview. And because of that, it caused some of her friends to maybe not want to hang out with her anymore. But I tell you, our worldview brings conviction to life. Number 3, our way of thinking is poured into the mode of our worldview. John McDowell said, if there is no creator God, then there is no external truth, and all you have left is man. If there is no creator God in which dwells truth apart from yourself, then all truth is created and truth is personal. So you can make your worldview be what you think about it. You can make your worldview what others, philosophers, professors say about it. Or you can make your worldview about what God says about it. And so, or a mixture of any of that. David Noble says, the line separating theology and philosophy is fragile. The line separating theology, philosophy, ethics, law, and politics is more so. In fact, there is no ultimate line, only a difference in emphasis and perspective. And he's right. Here, number 4 here, I think, will help us a lot. Our worldview explains our beliefs about God. That's the reason some people don't believe in God. Their worldview doesn't have a place for God. Our worldview explains our beliefs about sickness, death, and disease. Why are we sick? Why do people die? Our worldview explains our beliefs about the Bible and other religious documents. Which one do you accept? Our worldview explains our beliefs about the value of life. I mean, that's the reason some people's worldview would embrace abortion. My worldview can't do that. Why? It's rooted in the Bible. It's a Christian worldview, and therefore my worldview rejects abortion. And our worldview explains our beliefs about eternity. President Andrew Jackson once said, the Bible is true. That tells me something about his worldview. I bequeath my body to the dust whence it comes, and my soul to God who gave it, hoping for a happy immortality through the atoning merits of our Lord Jesus Christ. We just said our worldview explains our beliefs about eternity. We see that President Andrew Jackson had a belief about eternity that was emboldened in his worldview. And then number 5 here, ultimately, what we deem as truth is determined by our worldview. Now you see, folks, here's what I want to say about that. Too often we see things in bits and pieces. And these bits and pieces are a result of a bigger picture, which is our worldview. So look at this. Former Minnesota governor, who was a former wrestler, Jesse Ventura, in an interview with Playboy. Now, I didn't get it out of Playboy, understand it. It was quoted by the Associated Press, and that's where I got it. So I want to make that perfectly clear here now. But here's what Jesse Ventura said. Tells you about his worldview. He said, organized religion is a sham and a crutch for weak-minded people who need strength in numbers. It tells people to go out and stick their noses in other people's business. Look what Graham Greene said. He said, the truth has never been of any real value to human beings. What a statement. Certainly it has, but he said it is a symbol for mathematicians and philosophers to pursue. In human relations, kindness and lies are worth 1,000 truths. So truth doesn't really matter to him. And then number 6, a sixth fact about our worldview is in the end, our worldview answers the question, what am I willing to die for? Again, I go back to Columbine High School, and I have some things in here from Cassie Bernal, who died that day. Her mother wrote this. One day, a week or so before Cassie's death, we were sitting at the kitchen table talking and got onto the subject of death. I don't remember how. She said, Mom, I'm not afraid to die because I'll be in heaven. I told her I couldn't imagine her dying, that I couldn't bear the thought of living without her. She replied, but Mom, you know I was in a better place. Wouldn't you be happy for me? Wow, what a worldview this young lady has about eternity. And then another statement that was written by her. When God doesn't want me to do something, I definitely know it. When he wants me to do something, even if it means going outside of my comfort zone, I know that too. I feel pushed in the direction I need to go. I try to stand up for my faith at school. It can be discouraging, but it can be rewarding. I will die for my God. I will die for my faith. It's the least I can do for Christ dying for me. Wow. Hey, you young people, I hope you'll embrace at your young age this same worldview that Cassie embraced before she was killed. Now, folks, there's many various worldviews, and therefore there's much spiritual confusion in the world. According to one independent study, there's 4,300 different religions in the world. Man, what a lot of different worldviews. There's a lot of spiritual confusion, which means there's a lot of messed up worldviews in our world. Just quickly, let's look at America and an America worldview, Christian worldview in America. Number one, America has generally been described as a Christian nation. Our Constitution was formed around biblical principles. I'm grateful for that. We even today have benefited. We've been the benefactors of our founding fathers in developing a Constitution that was formed around a biblical worldview. Our nation has been influenced more by Christian worldview than any other nation. If you remember, there's been some writing about it from Alex Tocqueville, who was a Frenchman, and he wrote this after being in the United States and going around and observing. He said, "There's no country in the whole world in which the Christian religion retains a greater influence over the souls of men than in America. And there can be no greater proof of its utility and of its conformity to human nature than that its influence is most powerfully felt over the most enlightened and free nation of the earth." Unfortunately, America has been moving away from her godly heritage. We can't deny that. Francis Schaeffer says, "The basic problem of Christians in this country in the last 80 years or so, in regard to society and in regard to government, is that they have seen things in bits and pieces instead of totals." He goes on to say that Christians have very gradually become disturbed over permissiveness, pornography, the public schools, the breakdown of family, and finally abortion. But they have not seen this as a totality, each thing being a part, a symptom of a much larger problem. They have failed to see that all of this has come about due to the shift in a worldview. That is, through a fundamental change in the overall way people think and view the world and life as a whole. Now, folks, this is happening in our world. It's happening in politics. I mean, we're seeing Marxism now starting to get a real strong foothold in the United States. And we see all these various things that are happening with the move away from a Christian worldview. And we're ushering in a Marxist society. It's exactly what happened in Germany and Russia and other communist countries many decades ago. It's now doing the same thing here. We're seeing the silencing of free speech. We're seeing more and more of propaganda. All of this is a result of a change in worldview, folks. And you see, we're seeing all these things just as individual things on an island to themselves. No, there's a bigger picture here that all of these things fall in under. So let's look at number 2 here. America's Christian worldview has been slowly replaced over the years with an ungodly secular worldview. This pace accelerated greatly from 1962 to 1973 with several Supreme Court decisions. And let me just briefly hit them. In 62, you see that the court declared officially sanctioned prayer in public schools was unconstitutional. In 63, the court struck down the mandatory Bible readings in public schools. By the way, Bible reading never hurt anybody. It just made them better. I mean, our society's better if we operate off the 10 Commandments. Even someone who don't believe in the Bible don't want you to steal from them or kill them, tell them lies. In 73, the court modified its definition of obscenity from that of utterly without socially redeeming value, that was their definition, and to change it to which lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. And with the loosening of the belt of morality, it opened the door for many of the pornographic magazines and publications that we have. And then, of course, the famous Roe v. Wade in 73 that gave women the constitutional right to have an abortion. There's a statement in here that I won't get into for time's sake. You can read it by Chelsea Clinton, who said that it would be unchristian to prevent abortions. Now, do you see the difference in her worldview here? Her worldview is shaping her thoughts on abortion, where she thinks it's unchristian even to not allow abortions, when Proverbs chapter 6 clearly says it's an abomination to God to shed innocent blood. And so her worldview of looking at this is 180 degrees apart from the biblical worldview. So let's look then at 7 major worldviews. Number 1 is atheism, and atheism is a world without God. That is our worldview. We're going to explain it without any God. And then agnosticism. Agnosticism says, I don't know, maybe there's a God, maybe there's not, I don't know, but it just doesn't affect anything or affect the way I think. And so agnosticism would simply mean I have no knowledge of God. And so it is a soft form, if you will, of atheism. The end result's the same. And we see the second bullet point there is the naturalist and the evolutionist would fall into an atheistic worldview. Here's several statements by atheists. The first one by Carl Sagan. He says that the cosmos is all that is or ever was or ever will be. Obviously, he's got to believe in evolution. A second statement by this German atheist philosopher. It is clear as the sun and as evident as the day that there is no God, and still more that there can be no God. Ted Turner, here in the United States, Atlanta, he said Christianity is a religion for losers. So again, their worldview would be very different from ours. There's much that can be said about the atheistic worldview, but again, I'm just trying to give you the cliff notes. Secondly, we see theism. Theism is a world plus an infinite God. Now that's what I am. I'm a theist. I believe in God. And so there's three great monotheistic religions in the world, monotheistic meaning one God, and those are Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. Now, all of those will have a different take on the one God, which forms a different worldview, but nonetheless, all three are monotheistic in that they believe in one God. Now, the two great doctrines that separate Christianity from Judaism and Islam, and certainly other religions as well, are the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead and the Trinity. Those separate us from Judaism and from Islam. A third way of looking at the world is finite theism. Finite theism is a world with a finite God. That is, they believe in God, but you see here, finite theism sees God as good and righteous, but notice, but he's limited in power. That means he's not omnipotent, as we would claim, or certainly I would, and I believe I'm preaching to the choir here. And so they say God is loving and kind, but has no power to change anything. So therefore, they would say that's the reason that there's evil in the world. He loves the world, but he just don't have the power to change it. That's the reason people die, because God don't want them to. He loves them to, but he just has no power to change it. So that would be finite theism. It almost seems an oxymoron to say that there is a God, but he don't have power. I mean, how can that be? A fourth major worldview would be pantheism. Pantheism is a world that is God. They're earth worshipers. This is God. And basically these people are evolutionists because you see, they have to believe, and if you believe in evolution, you have to go all the way back to say at the very start, and there wasn't a start because a start means a beginning of time, but for us in our thinking, there either had to be God who eternally existed within himself and had the power to create what we see, or matter had to eternally exist and have the power to progress itself to get where we are, and so therefore it becomes the God that we worship, creation. This is the religion of the New Age. Earth worship is common with this group. Many of the greenies, as they're known, would align themselves with pantheism. I don't know if you've ever been out to Sedona, Arizona, but they go out there and that's where there's supposed to be a strong vortex, as they call it, and they sit out there and they just sit there and meditate and try to get in tune with the earth. They're pantheists. Then the fifth one, very close to that, is panentheism, and this is a world in God, because our world is in God in all of the universe. This is the religion of Star Wars, if you will. It's the belief that God is in everything, and so tap into everything that you can, if you will. Or that God is a force. If you remember in the Star Wars movies, they talk about the force. Well, God is a force, but this force is neither good or evil. It's just neutral. the force has both a light and a dark side. And so it would not be the God of holiness and righteousness that the Bible speaks about and that we believe and that we love. And then a sixth major worldview is deism. Now, deism is a world on its own made by God. And so here it is. Deism believes in a God who's out there but doesn't care about the affairs of earth. That is, deism is the concept of God as an absent landlord. Now, what that means is God created everything. He put certain laws in effect, like the law of gravity. He put the earth in its course. He's got a law for it to make its annual solar loop around the sun. But after God put everything in order, he just sits back and lets the earth run on its own, and he does not personally get involved with our lives or with anything on earth. Now, certainly that's not true of what the Bible teaches at all. But nonetheless, they believe in God, but they believe, if you will, God's just laying back in his heavenly hammock, taking it easy, and just letting all of his creation run on its own course based off the laws that he's put in place. Now, this was a theist evolutionist would fall into this worldview. Now, I'm sure most of you know what that is, but a theist is someone who believes in God, but an evolutionist is someone who believes that everything started with matter and progressively got better till we have what we have today. And so they would say, the theist evolutionists would say that God created that original matter, and then he's, again, sitting back, laying around in his heavenly hammock and letting that run its course, and after billions of years, it's produced what we have today. Well, if that's the truth, then God really didn't create us, and therefore he has no purpose or meaning for our lives. It's in direct contradiction. A theist evolutionist is really a contradiction in terms to me. And then the seventh and last one is polytheism, and this is a world with many gods. The bullet points here is the theme of polytheism, and then I'm getting this quote from Mormonism, is man now is, God once was, and as God now is, man may become. So basically Mormons believe that you don't think of them as being polytheistic, but they are, because they believe that God was once a man that some way or another was able to obtain unto godship, if you will. And so as man now is, God once was. He was a man. But as God now is, man may become. We too can obtain this higher state to become a god. Well, if that's the case, then they're polytheistic because there's many, many gods. So the next bullet point there is Hinduism is the world's largest polytheistic religion. They believe in many gods and will therefore be quick to accept your form of God as well. Hey, I have seen Hindus accept God just like that. I've seen them pray to accept Jesus just like that. Why? Well, if there's another God out there, we better get him too, because we don't want to miss one, because that may adversely affect us in this life or in eternity or with our karma or whatever. And so they're quick to accept any and all forms of God. So the last bullet point I just mentioned, but America's largest polytheistic religion is Mormonism. Mormonism teaches that God was once a man that became God, and therefore men can now obtain unto godship, if you will. And so, again, I went through this very quickly, but I hope this gives you at least some idea as we try to introduce this whole idea of a Christian worldview. Folks, if you would study the world, all the religions of the world, all the nationalities of the world, all the languages of the world, all the traditions of the world. I mean, all of these things, we see various worldviews incorporated into them. Now, we're going to get into it in our second lesson on apologetics. But again, I want to go back to where we started. Folks, it all starts with the mind. Don't discard the importance of your thinking. Your thinking is what shapes your worldview. And that shapes your beliefs. And that shapes your behaviors. It's no wonder that we're told to be not conformed to this world, there in Romans 12, but to be transformed By the what? Renewing of your mind. That word renewing of your mind is the word renovation. As you would go into an old home, my wife loves to watch HGTV. Can I get a witness, ladies? And so since she likes it, I have to watch some of them too. But they'll go in and buy these old homes, and some of them I'm thinking, good night, somebody just needs to light a stick of dynamite, throw it in that door and run. But no, they take those things and they renovate them to the point that they're beautiful, and they sell them for a good price. Folks, we need to take the junk out of our minds, and we need to renovate our minds with the Word of God so that we have a Christian, biblical worldview, and let it shape the way that we think and therefore the way that we live. Let it shape the way that we think and therefore the way that we treat others. The way that we think and therefore the way that we can witness to others. I'm telling you, it's important how you think. Love the Lord your God with all your heart. Oh, yes. Love the Lord your God with all of your heart and all of your soul. And love the Lord your God with all of your strength. Give him everything. But dear friend, don't become a lazy thinking Christian. I challenge you. Get in the Word every day. You don't understand it? Buy some commentaries. Read them. Make sure you go listen to your pastor as he preaches the Word of God. Make sure you get in a Sunday school class where you get more of the Word so that it can shape your thinking. Because I'm telling you, we need to always be developing the Christian worldview that Jesus had. I look forward to lesson 2. We'll see you next time.